Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Colour Cube Challenge, where we are taking this box of loveliness created by the lovely Sarah Rennie-Clark and using it to inspire our work and expand our creativity.
So, this episode of the challenge, we are going to start at card number 11. Now, I am very inspired by this bowl of fruit. So, because of that inspiration, I immediately thought of the Fruitopolis collection and I thought that I would create with that. So, I'm keeping it nice and simple, staying sort of within my comfort zone and doing lots of stamping, building a scene and colouring it in. So, I'm going to be using a masking tape. I've stamped it on my card, but I'm also just stamping it there on copier paper and I am cutting that out. Using this technique, it is best just to use copier paper actually because it's nice and thin. So the more cheap and cheerful the better. If you use a good quality cardstock, there's a bit of a ridge and so then you end up with a bit nasty stamping. We don't like that. So it's nice, it's good to use your cheap as chip stuff. So once I've built a mask on there, we then sort of start adding all the different images to build up a little scene. It's quite funny when you do this because right now it looks an absolute hot mess because all the lines overlap and it's like, what on earth is that, you crazy lady? But once you start taking the masks off, it looks good. So trust the process. And yeah, it gets there okay. I use the Crafters Companions repositional glue on the back of my mask to be able to kind of make it stick. So once my scene is ready, I then pull out my pens. I'm using a mixture of Copics and Ohuhu and swatching them out. So the colours on this particular card are clay, mustard, raspberry, orange and olive. And what I do like about the way Sarah has designed these cards is that on the back there's the 3 different shades. So you've got your highlight, shadow and mid-tone, and that is the way I like to colour. So it's good to have that variety. Now, I say that this is sort of in my comfort zone. We are colouring a scene. I'm working with my alcohol markers. But what I have realised in doing this is that when I blend with alcohol markers, I use a lot more colours in a blend. I obviously tend to use at least 5. So I was finding, although I did have my shadow, mid-tone and highlight, that for me personally I was missing a couple of colours in the middle, which meant I had to get a little bit more creative in the way that I coloured so that it looked okay. So for example, that bush, I ended up doing like a dotting technique so that we had a bit of a better transition between one colour and the next. But that ended up adding to the overall piece because we had a lot more texture. So I think in this colouring page I added a lot more texture than I would have, but that was because I was pushed outside my comfort zone with regard to only having 3 colours for each colourway. So that worked out really well. And I'm just kind of keeping going with this. And again, you can see that I'm bringing that dotting technique in with an orange, but that works because an orange has that sort of texture. So it works really well, and I'm definitely learning a lot from this. I have to say that is why I've started this challenge, because although I bought these blocks with the intention of expanding what I did, and I have sort of used more colourways than I normally do, but I was still sort of sticking to my favourites. And this challenge of having to do them all is really working for me because not only is expanding my creativity with regards to colour, it's also I'm having to adapt to work with the different colorways, and I'm having to adapt with regard to technique, but also to the types of things that I'm making. So I am finding that it is really working well. Now we see this at the end of this particular make. I love building scenes. Anyone that knows me knows that this is my wheelhouse. I love stamping, building a scene and colouring it in with my alcohol markers. And at this stage now, what I would tend to do is to pull in a blue distress ink. But blue wasn't on the card, so I couldn't do that. So although I like building scenes, I tend to be quite traditional. I tend to have green for the grass and blue for the sky, which is nothing wrong with that. But instead we have orange. And because of that, we've got this beautiful warm scene. It looks almost like a sunrise or sunset. And I genuinely would not have done that had it not been for trying to stick rigidly to this particular card and colour combo. And I have to say, I really love how it turned out. Really, really happy with that. Once I had all the main colour down, I then go in with a white paint pen just to add those juicy highlights. It tends to really make things pop, adding in all of those extra details. And I don't know, just there's something about white highlights, isn't it? They just look so good. And then finally I add a doodly border because it's me and I can't live without it. So we have the doodly border. For today I'm just leaving that as is. It's just a little mini colouring page that I've enjoyed doing. At some other point in time I may either add it to a card or to a journal page. But as it is just now, that is the completed project for card number 11. The next card that we are going to do is number 12, because we're working our way through from 1 to 100. No, 1 to 100, 1 to 500. We've got quite a bits to go, I tell you. Now, I really like this card. There's me saying that I've not particularly had many that I've fallen in love with, but I like this colour combo. And what I really like is the way those birds really pop off the page because of the dark background. So at this point, I didn't really know what I was wanting to do for this particular make, but I did want a dark background. The blue paint that I had wasn't quite the same colourway as what was on the card. That is showing up as dark blue, but there is a slight red purpley tone to it. So I mixed in a tiny bit of red and then painted it out. This is just a page in my Pink Pig journal. It was a mop-up page, so we've got a bit of dodgy stamping going on there. I didn't stamp that very evenly, and a bit of a mop-up. So I am just painting over that. Originally in my head I quite liked that painterly look where you see the edges of the paint strokes, but then I didn't like it, so then we just covered it all up and created a dark background, and that was going to be the base for my project on this one. So on this card we have dark blue, hunter green, apple green, mustard and scarlet. And then I decide to sketch in. I'm kind of wishing that I'd used a reference for this. I think had I used a reference, then I would have kind of put a few more different ideas together. I maybe would have had a much better composition, and I think I'd have had much more interesting mushrooms. Those I've just kind of gone for the bog standard round cartoony style mushrooms, which are okay. And actually I like the way it all turns out, but yeah, in future I will be using a reference. So I'm putting a loose sketch down. And I'm just showing you here that I'm pointing out this brown. The reason I'm pointing out this brown is because there isn't a brown on the colour combo, but there is in the reference picture, and obviously I have a tree to paint. So I'm bringing out my Hemi Gouache and I am matching the colours up. That green, we didn't have one that was quite the right colour, so I just had to sort of mix it a bit till we got it to match. And then when I had all my colours sorted, I started blocking in. Now, what is really quite interesting about this is I was talking about the fact that this box is inspiring me to try new techniques. I am an artist and I create art for the craft industry, so I turn my artwork into stamps and papers and dies and all of that sort of stuff. But I wouldn't call myself a traditional artist as such. I very rarely sit and paint a whole painting, although I've been doing that a lot more recently. But I tend to sketch in a sketch pad, so it tends to be doodles and sketches. I then turn those doodles and sketches into line work. I quite often digitise them, line work, and then I colour them in with my Copic markers. So although I find I really struggle calling myself an artist, colourist I'm okay with, but artist I struggle with. But I do feel like basically I just colour in my own images. So doing this sort of thing is really, really different. And I really enjoyed it. It was very, very different. And also I really have no idea what I'm doing. I mean, I understand colour theory to an extent. I understand where the shadows should go and the highlights should go. But that was about it. Layering acrylic paint and making it work. Not really in my wheelhouse at all. As you can see from this atrocity. This also shows that it's really important to let yourself go through the ugly stage and keep going. I mean, look at that. I could have quite easily binned it at that point. I mean, that looks absolutely atrocious. So obviously I did panic slightly. And what I did to help the situation was I pulled that blue paint that was in the background and decided to sort of paint over it, knock it back a little bit, which kind of works because it's night time. And I've been spending a lot of time in forest recently and sketching on sketchbook dates. I did actually film this quite a few months ago, in all honesty. Since then I've done a lot of on location painting. But you know what, tree trunks are very rarely brown. There's some gorgeous golden colours, and there's greys and there's greens, but actually spending time studying trees, the traditional brown that we stick on there's very few of them that actually have that. So this is much more realistic, and especially as a nighttime tree, because it's going to be nighttime lighting. So it kind of worked really well. I'm also showing you this. I mean, look at the state of that brush. This is a broken brush. It's probably been gel medium together a few times and rescued, because it's not a nice, beautiful watercolour soft brush. But I tell you what, it is great for that stippling effect and creating the foliage of the trees. It looks so impressive. And basically all I've got is a scraggly, scrawny brush that I'm just sort of stippling, for want of a better word. So I'm liking how the trees are turning out. And look how much better that branch work looks now that we've kind of, you can still see that the edges of the tree are there, but we don't have that hideous brown thing going on. I'm trying to get the same sort of look with the mushrooms. I really struggled with these mushrooms, I don't know why. So I keep sort of trying to add yellow for the highlights and the blue for the background. Also, for some reason I failed to record the part where we added those fireflies, which is a shame because I think they've added a gorgeous glow. I am going with that lightest yellow now that's in it and just trying to catch the edges of the canopy of that foliage, and I really just think it's looking really magical. And then a few little yellow lines. I think from watching this and from knowing how much I love the end result of this, but how much I struggled with the brushes I have, I think I'd quite like to treat myself to some detailed brushes for acrylic painting, and also a nice set of watercolour brushes. But I am a little bit concerned, as you saw with that earlier brush, I'm a little bit concerned that I could destroy them because I'm not very good at looking after my brushes. But I've enjoyed this painting so much that it would be quite nice to take it a bit more seriously. I've come in with some paint pens. This is quite funny. See if you can see how many times the pen switches in my hand. We go from a paint pen to a Posca pen quite a few times. I think I must have been really struggling to get the pen to work, so I've switched back and forth in the attempts to try and find a white pen that actually works. So we're adding in a few little highlights of this page, and I actually really like it. I think I probably would change the composition. Definitely want to play with this sort of idea a bit more, but kind of absolutely love the result. And again, not something I would have done if it hadn't been for the fact that I pulled this particular card out of the Colour Cube box. So moving on to card number 13. This one, not happy with those colours at all. I just could not get inspired. So in the end, I decided to do a grid journal. This is only the second time I've ever done a grid journal. I did one in a live last week, and I thought, do you know what, it'll work for this. Basically then, I'm not having to think about an overall finished project. I'm just sloshing paint round. It's a bit like building a background for a project, but because you do the grid journaling and take the tape off, it turns into little mini works of art. And I just thought, in playing with these colours and not being sure of the colours, it just gave me a chance to play and not be too worried about the end result. So I pull out some Neo colours and bring out some colours that are in the card. So on this particular card, we have mustard, orange, scarlet, hunter green and dark green. So I found both the mustard and the scarlet as Neo colours, and I basically just scribbling. To be honest, I've been sorting out my craft space, and I have looked at, I have many craft supplies, and a lot of them that have not had a lot of love. These Neo colours are that. I was desperate to have these, and I remember spending a fortune on them, and I barely use them, as you can see, because they're very full shaped crayons. Considering I've had them for years, they've not been used much. So I'm kind of scribbling and moving it around a little bit. I think this is why I don't like them, because I like quite a smooth blend, and anytime you use things like this, you kind of get the scratchy look of the colour when it goes down, and then the watery look. But for this page it kind of worked. And then pull out a Brilliance ink pad. This is a copper and it matched the orange, and I'm using a stencil from Art Inspirations. That's the lovely Leonie's brand. What I really enjoyed about doing this is at this point I started cleaning up the stencil, but then put it on the same page. So I often do this. I use a stencil and then I spray it with water and stick whatever's left of the ink into a mop-up page, but I was able to just use it on the same page, which I thought was really cool. And then pull out another Brilliance ink pad, this time with the hunter green colour. This stamp happened to me on my desk from another project, and I just use that to create a little bit of background interest. I love this stamp. This stamp is from Carabelle, and we actually used it in the make last week where we were creating art with toilet paper. Yes, I did say that right, and it actually turned out really cool, so do feel free to check that out. And I'm just grabbing a stencil and a gel pen. This was in a dark green as well, so I'm quite enjoying that with these cards. Is quite often with the doodling I just automatically pull out a black pen, but because I'm trying to stick to the prompt, I am actually pulling out different colours. This bit I'm actually writing stuff. It wasn't anything of consequence, but I find doing this loose messy writing, if I just try and do like scribbles, it doesn't really work. I have to sort of be writing something. So I think it was things like, I am using the Sarah Rennie Clark colour cube. I'm experimenting with colour. It's nothing of great insight, but if you do it really scribbly, it's not readable anyway, and I find it helps me to flow a bit more. So I am just adding the features now to my background. This is the Rose Trellis stamp set, and I've pulled out some greens from my acrylic marker set. So this is the hunter green and the dark green, and I'm just sort of colouring through and adding these leaves to the project. I try and make sure that each square has got a little bit of everything. So each square has each of the colours and the features, and so that way when we take the tape off, they'll be kind of the same but different. Decided we didn't have quite enough red, so went in and added a few hearts, and this is it. We just need to do the satisfying tape peel, except I couldn't remember which way I'd put all the tape on, so it took me a while to work that out. But this is what I mean. I've essentially just created a background, and in the past that wouldn't have felt like a finished piece. It would have kind of gone into my stack of backgrounds that I would have crafted with at a later date. But doing it with this sort of grid journaling style where we take it out and we expose that white border, it looks like little mini pieces of artwork, and I really like that. I think it's good for if you're stuck creatively. I think it's a really good exercise. So that is the finished project for card number 13. And finally, we're moving on to 14. This is a quick and easy make for this particular card. So this card we have rose, tan, beige, clay, sand and taupe. So this one, it's not my usual colours, but I actually really like that. I kind of connected with it. Now in my bit box I found this little coffee cup. That is one I had made when we did the Hug and the Mug launch, and I had done all sorts of things. I'd added corrugated card to it and puffy paint to make it look like really textural, and it was the perfect colours. So because there's a gorgeous grey in the collection, I just decided to stamp the background in grey. I've added a little bit of Copic marker just to ground it, and I also had these little chocolates in the stash as well that had been coloured to match. So this is why I love a bit box. This would be my sort of end of day crafting, couple of bits left, make a quick little mini card with what's on your desk, and it was perfect because it ended up being the perfect colours for this particular card. So this one was just kind of like really quickly put together, and delighted with how it turned out, and I really like the simplicity of it. So we're just going to add in those little chocolates, and then I've decided it's slightly too plain, so again pull out my Kuretake Gansei Tambies, find a paint colour that is about right for the collection, and add a few splatters. So this is this one here, and you can see how they all look together. If you enjoy this, there is a whole playlist because I'm working my way through both cubes, and you might enjoy checking out the previous videos right here.